Hey y'all, it's Kim again. So this is another document from the National Security Archive. This is basically concerned about nuclear weapons potential. John F. Kennedy pushed for inspection of Israel nuclear facilities and like Dimona, and then we saw Sorek, I think is what it's called. But anyway, in this picture, we've got John F. Kennedy was a member of Congress when he first met Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion in 1951. In this photograph taken at Ben-Gurion's home, Franklin D. Roosevelt Jr., then a member of Congress from New York, sat between them. And that image is from Geopolitik in perspective. I don't know. Whatever. We'll just read the introduction of this, and then I'll just break this up into a few videos because it's like long. But anyways, as Atomic Energy Commission inspectors gave Dimona a clean bill of health twice after deliberately truncating tours, but U.S. intelligence remained suspicious. International Atomic Energy Agency inspections of Dimona was our objective, according to the State Department. Washington, D.C., April 21st, 2016. Why does that have that? I guess that's the date this was written. But President John F. Kennedy worried that Israel's nuclear program was a potentially serious proliferation risk and insisted that Israel permit periodic inspections to mitigate the danger, according to declassified documents published today by the National Security Archive, Nuclear Proliferation International History Project, and James Martin Carter for Nonproliferation Studies. Kennedy pressured the government of Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion to prevent a military nuclear program, particularly after stage-managed tours of the Dimona facility for U.S. government scientists in 1961 and 62 raised suspicion within U.S. intelligence that Israel might be concealing its underlying nuclear aims. Kennedy's long-run objective, documents show, was to broaden and institutionalize inspections of Dimona by the International Atomic Energy Agency. On 30th of May 1961, Kennedy met Ben-Gurion in Manhattan to discuss the bilateral relationship and Middle East issues. However, a central and indeed the first issue in their meeting was the Israeli nuclear program, about which President Kennedy was most concerned. According to a draft record of their discussion, which has never been cited and is published here for the first time, Ben-Gurion spoke rapidly and in a low voice, and some words were missed. He emphasized the peaceful economic development-oriented nature of the Israeli nuclear project. Nevertheless, the note-taker, Assistant Secretary of State Phillips Talbot, believed that he heard Ben-Gurion mention a pilot plant to process plutonium for atomic power, and also say that there's no intention to develop weapons capacity now. Ben-Gurion tacitly acknowledged that the Dimona reactor had a military potential, or so Talbot believed he had heard. The final U.S. version of the MEMCON, Memorandum of Conversation, that's what I learned in the other video, retained the sentence about plutonium, but did not include the language about a pilot plant and weapons capacity. The difference between the two versions suggests the difficulty of preparing accurate records of meeting. But whatever Ben-Gurion actually said, President Kennedy was never wholly satisfied with the insistence that Dimona was strictly a peaceful project. Neither were U.S. intelligence professionals. A recently declassified national intelligence estimate on Israel, prepared several months after the meeting and published here for the first time, concluded that Israel may have decided to undertake a nuclear weapons program. At a minimum, we believe it has decided to develop its nuclear facilities in such a way as to put it into a position to develop nuclear weapons promptly should it decide to do so. This is the only NIE where the discussion of Dimona has been declassified in its entirety. Declassified documents reveal that more than any other American president, John F. Kennedy was personally engaged with the problem of Israel's nuclear program. He may also have been more concerned about it than any of his successors. Of all U.S. leaders in the nuclear age, Kennedy was the non-proliferation president. Nuclear proliferation was his private nightmare, as Glenn Seaborg, his Atomic Energy Commission chairman, once noted. Kennedy came to office with the conviction that the spread of nuclear weapons will make the world a much more dangerous place, mad, mutual assured destruction, just throwing that in there. So he saw proliferation as the path to a global nuclear war. This concern shaped his outlook on the Cold War even before the 1960 presidential campaign. By then, he was already opposed the resumption of nuclear testing, largely due to proliferation concerns, and his experience in office, especially the Cuban Missile Crisis, solidified it further. The Electronic Briefing Board book, or EBB, is the first of two publications which address the subject of JFK, his administration, and the Israeli nuclear program. It includes about 30 documents produced by the State Department, the Atomic Energy Commission, and intelligence agencies, some of which highlight the president's strong personal interest and direct role in moving nonproliferation policy forward during the administration's first 2 years. Some of the documents have been only recently declassified, while others were located in archival locations or collections. Most are published here for the first time. The compilation begins with President Kennedy's meeting with Department Ambassador to Israel Ogden Reed on January 31st, 1961, days after Kennedy took office, and concludes with the State Department's internal review in the late 1962 of the second U.S. visit in Dimona. Okay, they messed that up. The documents published today may also include the Atomic Energy Commission's recently declassified report on the first official U.S. visit to the Dimona complex in May of 1961. The Ben-Gurion Kennedy meeting was possible only after the visit produced a positive report on the peaceful, non-military purposes of the reactor. According to the Atomic Energy Commission, or AEC, Dimona was conceived as a means for gaining experience in construction of a nuclear facility, which would prepare them for nuclear power in the long run. A letter from the State Department to the AEC asking it to place prominent Israeli nuclear scientist Dr. Israel Dostrovsky of the Weizmann Institute, who was a visiting researcher at the Brookhaven National Laboratory, under discreet surveillance as a precautionary step to safeguard U.S. nuclear know-how. The document notes Dostrovsky's reputation as one of the individuals primarily responsible for guiding Israel's atomic energy program. In 1966, Dostrovsky was appointed by Prime Minister Levi Eshkol as Director General of Israel's Atomic Energy Commission, which he organized and gave new impetus. Recently declassified records of U.S.-UK meetings during 1962 to discuss the possibility of putting pressure on Israel to accept inspections of Dimona by the International Atomic Energy Agency. While State Department officials did not believe that pressure will work, they agreed that IAEA controls should be our objective. In the meantime, interim ad hoc inspections were necessary to satisfy ourselves and the world at large as to Israel's intentions. An assessment of the second AEC visit to the Dimona site in September of 1962, after weeks of diplomatic pressure by the Kennedy administration for a second visit, two AEC scientists who had inspected the U.S. supplied Sorek reactor were spontaneously visited for I think it's 40 to 45 minutes. All other references are to 40. A 45 minutes tour to Dimona while on their way back from an excursion to the Dead Sea. They had no time to see the complete installation, but they left the site with the impression that Dimona was a research reactor, not a production reactor. CIA and State Department officials were skeptical about the circumstances, unable to determine whether the spontaneous invitations was a trick or a treat, or a treat or a trick. Okay, so then this is also about that same document we looked at, the Kennedy, Dimona, and the nuclear proliferation problem. We're just gonna stop it here, and then we may look through some of this. It may give us a little bit more information since it's written by somebody else, but it's basically the same people. This Abner Cohen and William Burr. That was who wrote the last article over here with the Kennedy or this Wilson Center thing. So anyway, I will talk to y'all later. I may do one more video, but this will be for the Iran stuff. But anyway, I will see y'all around. Bye.